Welcome to Kathy's Eclectic Garden. I'm Kathy and I garden in Zone 5B 6A in Northwest Ohio. The little clip you saw at the beginning was a rainstorm that we had a week or so ago, and we got 1.5 inches of rain. It was much needed rain because we've been very dry so far this summer. And a couple of days later we got another 1/4 inch. And today we're going to do a short little tour of the first native plants that I started in my Mesic Garden. The first plant I want to talk about is the first native plant that I intentionally purchased as a native. I had other plants in my garden that were native, but I didn't know they were native when I planted them. This is a cup plant, and I purchased this plant from Martha at Riverview Natives in Spencerville, Indiana, and she and I have become good friends over the years. I bought this plant about 5 years ago, and about the 3rd year I was over there buying some more plants, and I was telling her how well this plant was growing and how big it had gotten, how much room it was taking up. And she goes, "Well, how many of those did I sell you?" And I said, "Well, I bought 3 of them." And she goes, "Oh my goodness, what was I thinking?" So I've always remembered that. I thought it was kind of funny. But this is a cup plant. It's a Silphium perfolatum is the scientific name. It is also called a pitcher plant or a compass plant. It's hardy in zones 3B to 9B, and it's part of the aster family. As you can see, it gets quite tall. You can get up to 10 feet, and I know mine has been at least 10 feet. And it likes wet to mesic soil. And in this garden is on a slope, and this end of the garden is more wet than the top end. It's native to much of the eastern United States, and the reason it's called a cup plant is because the leaves come together and they form a cup. And when it rains, that fills with water, and birds and insects can use it as a place to drink. This is the original Rattlesnake Master that was planted at the time. That was the top of the garden. We had 2 plants and they are still coming up, but it has spread. If you let this plant go to seed, it's quite a prolific spreader, and it spreads mostly by the wind blowing the seeds, because we can trace the path of this plant all the way through our garden, all the way to the back edge of the garden. So you want to be careful. It's a beautiful plant, it's a good pollinator, but you want to make sure that you either have a lot of room for it or you trim the seed heads off and don't let it go to seed, because otherwise you'll be pulling up little Rattlesnake Masters all over your yard. And also, I didn't mention that about the cup plant, but the cup plant is the same way. And the cup plant also spreads by rhizomes, but I think it spreads more by seed than it does rhizomes. So those are two plants that you want to be particularly careful of when you plant them, and make sure they have a lot of room. This plant showed up in my garden this year. I didn't plant it, but it is an annual native wildflower in the spurge family, and it's native mostly in North Carolina and the central and eastern USA and up into Canada. This is an Aculeifum rhomboidea, a common 3-seeded mercury or copperleaf, and I thought I would leave it here because it had a lot of insect damage, and I thought I could use it as a trap plant for whatever insect or caterpillar is chewing on it, and maybe keep it off of my plants that I don't want to get eaten. And then I discovered you don't want this plant in your yard because it will spread everywhere. So I'm going to leave it there for a while, but once it starts to flower, that's going to be coming out. Right beside it is Walter the water spout. This tall plant next to me is another native. It's tall Ironweed, Vernonia gigantea, and it's hardy in zones 4 to 9. It blooms summer to fall, and you can see it's just starting to bloom. It has pretty purple flowers, and if you can see all of the buds, it's going to be covered here in another few days. This is another plant that likes wet to mesic soil, and like the cup plant, the ironweed is planted right here beside it at the bottom of this garden where it's the wettest. I just wanted to show you, this is a tall ironweed that I planted from seed over the winter, and this is what the young plants look like. This is a first-year plant. This is lavender augustifolia, and a Munstead lavender. It's not a native, but this lavender has been here for many years, long before I ever thought about planting native plants. It blooms from June to August, and it likes full sun and drier soil, and it is at the top of this garden, so it's a lot drier at the top than it is down where the cup plant and the ironweed are. In this little bucket next to the lavender is a Penstemon. It's a red rocks beard tongue, and I started this from seed that was sent to me by a friend of mine on my YouTube channel, who I sent purple milkweed seeds to, and she in turn sent me some of her red rocks Penstemon. So we did a little seed exchange for these plants, and that's always fun. Here in front of me is a Joe Pye weed. This is Eutrochium purpureum. It's purple Joe Pye. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9. It likes partial to full sun, and it gets partial sun in the morning because these taller plants behind it shade it, and in the afternoon it's on the west side of the garden, so it gets the afternoon sun. It likes moist to medium soil, and it's kind of in the middle of this Mesic Garden, so it's planted in the right place. Not far from the Joe Pye purpureum is his brother, Joe Pye. It's Eutrochium maculatum, and it gets a little taller, but they're very similar plants. Now, in between the two Joe Pyes, we have another milkweed, Asclepias incarnata. This is swamp milkweed. It's also called pink milkweed or marsh milkweed. It's hardy in zones 3 to 6. Some sources say it's even hardy up to zone 11. It gets 4 to 5 feet tall. This one I doubt will get that tall. It's kind of shaded, so it doesn't get really full sun like it likes. But it does like wet soil, hence the name swamp milkweed. And it's pretty wet here, so it does like this spot. This is another one of the first plants I put in this garden. It's a native wild Senna. Senna hebecarpa. It's hardy in zones 4 to 8. It gets 3 to 7 foot tall. I'm not sure if this one's going to get that tall this year, but last year it probably did get close to 7 feet tall. It's one of my favorite plants. I love the leaves on it. It has almost a ferny look to the leaf, and then it gets these really pretty, interesting yellow flowers. They look almost like a pea-type flower. That's my little native Mesic garden. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I've piqued your interest in native plants, and you will start planting some natives in your garden. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.